Fellas, we are here. It is the fantasy football playoffs, which means we are breaking down my top 36 running back rankings in tier list format going into your week 15 matchups. This, of course, is a very crucial week for a lot of you. Maybe you have a bye week. You can just sit back, relax, and enjoy. But I'm sure a lot of you guys have playoff matchups to get into today. So let's not waste any time. Starting off with the bye weeks, of course, it is week 15, so there are no more byes. Getting into the major injuries that we have this week, there is a couple big name running backs that could be on the mend, could be on the shelf for week 15, and a number of other guys that are banged up here. So starting with Bucky Irving, we do have a situation where he is a true game time decision for Sunday afternoon's game against the Chargers. He did not practice Wednesday, did not practice Thursday, and then was limited in practice on Friday. My read on the situation is that he's probably going to be maybe active but limited or outright out for the game. So I would imagine that this is going to be a big-time upgrade to Rachaad White. Whatever happens here, he is probably my preference of the two running backs. Even if Irving is active, I don't think he'll be playing his full workload. Kenneth Walker, we have also dealing with a calf injury still that sidelined him last week. He is listed doubtful for week 15. If you guys are on a bye and you have Kenneth Walker, hopefully he'll be back for you in week 16. But it looks like we will get another heavy dose of Zach Charbonnet for the Seattle Seahawks. And then with the Chicago Bears running backs, we have DeAndre Swift dealing with a groin injury. Roschon Johnson still in the concussion protocol. Remember that they will have one more practice today because they play on Monday night, but both of them did not practice on Thursday or Friday. So we are at risk here of Travis Homer being the starting running back for the Chicago Bears on Monday night. My guess is that one of these guys will be active. I'm just not sure which one. We have 2 more days to clear the protocol for Roschon, and also if Swift practices in like a limited capacity on Saturday, maybe he's going to be active for this game. But just keep that in mind. If you have Swift, if you have Roschon, maybe make other plans because you might not know until Monday whether or not they will be active. So expected to play, guys that are banged up that are expected to go. We have Breece Hall with the knee injury. He fully practiced on Friday. He's listed questionable for week 15, but Jeff Ulbrich said he's going to play. Again, a little bit sketchy because we know that in week 13, he was playing kind of banged up and only had 13 total opportunities and had a pretty bad game. Tony Pollard also listed questionable for week 15's game. He didn't practice Wednesday, Thursday, and then on Friday, he was a limited participant with the ankle issue. So Tony Pollard also kind of maybe downgrade him a little bit, given the matchup against Cincinnati is not great, and the fact that he is coming in with a active injury and Tajay Spears might get more work as a result. And then, of course, 2 other guys that I got to talk about, Jonathan Brooks, Zamir White, both placed on season-ending IR, so that is an upgrade for Chuba Hubbard and Sincere McCormick for the rest of the season. Locked-in running back starts, so going over my top 12 guys. If you guys are new around here, basically I just go over guys who are in good matchups, high-scoring games, and then bad matchups because you should know at this point in the season to be starting some of these players. So elite running backs in good matchups this week. We have Gibbs and Montgomery, both inside my top 12 this week, versus the Buffalo Bills, 31st ranked against the run. Joe Mixon versus the Dolphins, easy matchup there. Derrick Henry against the Giants, smash spot for him there. Bijan versus the Raiders, also a smash spot for him. Kyron Williams, who played on Thursday Night Football, didn't find the end zone, but had a lot of touches there against San Francisco. Green Bay game there, we have both Zach Charbonnet and Josh Jacobs having great matchups for those dudes. And then when it comes to high-scoring over-under games, we obviously want running backs in these game environments. Gibbs and Montgomery in a 54.5-point over-under game versus the Buffalo Bills. Kyron versus the San Francisco 49ers was expected to be a high-scoring game. The weather kind of got in the way of that. And then Joe Mixon and Achane in the same game. Chase Brown versus the Titans, a high-scoring game. And then Josh Jacobs and Charbonnet also in the same game on Sunday night, expected to be pretty high-scoring. And then some elite running backs who are in bad matchups. So maybe temper expectations for these guys, downgrade them a little bit, but you're still probably starting them. Devon Achane versus the Texans. They are a top 5 run defense, but Achane, of course, catches a lot of passes, so he should be fine. Chase Brown versus the Titans. Again, same thing. He catches a lot of passes. It's a high-scoring game. He should be okay. Alvin Kamara versus the Washington Commanders. Again, rinse and repeat. He catches so many passes that it doesn't really matter. And then Saquon Barkley versus the Steelers. They are technically a league average run defense, but they are capable of playing at a very high level just on defense in general. So I do want to highlight one guy in this tier who did see an uptick in his usage, and that was Zach Charbonnet. Of course, with Kenneth Walker out last week, we saw back in week 2 and week 3, he was a 75+% snap share guy. And then again in week 14, when Charbonnet was the starter, he saw yet another monster game there. 79% of the snaps, 71% of the carries, 63% route participation, actually was targeted on 24% of the Seahawks pass attempts and finished as the RB1 overall on the entire week. It makes you think that Charbonnet maybe should be the one starting the whole time, but he is definitely a great play this week without Kenneth Walker on Sunday Night Football. So getting into the actual tier list itself, I'm going to go 6 running backs at a time, break down their usage, some pick'ems that we're going to be doing, and also whether or not I would start them. Of course, if I have a guy ranked RB14 and then another guy ranked RB20, and you're deciding between the two players, the RB14 is the one that I would start. So Chuba Hubbard versus the Dallas Cowboys. They are 21st in adjusted fantasy points allowed per Draft Sharks to the fantasy football running back position. Elite workload for Chuba Hubbard in Week 14. With Jonathan Brooks now out for the season and Raheem Blackshear was actually ruled out during Week 14's game, both going down versus the Eagles. The only top 10 week the Eagles have ever allowed this season to a running back all season. Chuba Hubbard over 20 PPR points in that game. The Cowboys are a much easier matchup than the Eagles were last week. And with Brooks out for this game and Blackshear coming in questionable, I expect another huge workload for Chuba Hubbard. I don't think he'll probably get 97% of the snaps again, but 85, 90% of the snaps definitely within the range of outcomes. And I like him to go higher than 99.5 rushing plus receiving yards over on Underdog Fantasy. Cowboys are 12th in rushing yards allowed per game. They're 6th in receiving yards allowed per game to the running back position. And Hubbard has beaten this total in all 5 games where he's received 20 plus touches, which is what I expect from him this week against the Cowboys. So also an interesting nugget to this game. This is the first time since December of 2022 that the Carolina Panthers are actually favored by Vegas. So it's possible that they actually win this game or at least keep this one very close. So that's good news for Chuba Hubbard especially. So running back 14, we have Aaron Jones versus the Chicago Bears. The Vikings are implied for over 25 points, and this matchup is a total Aaron Jones smash spot. As we saw back in Week 12, Aaron Jones had 21.9 PPR points in that game, going over 130 total yards on his 25 touches. The Bears are a top 7 pass defense, but they are a bottom 8 rush defense. So it is a run funnel defense. Aaron Jones on Monday night is going to be a big key to the Vikings probably winning that game. And that Week 12 game actually was in Chicago. So this one being in Minnesota, definitely expecting a big game out of Aaron Jones and a big performance there. RB15 for me in my rankings is Brian Robinson Jr. versus the New Orleans Saints. They are 29th against fantasy running backs, so a very good matchup for him. I can argue, honestly, that no running back needed a bye week more than Brian Robinson this past week. He started the first 4 weeks of the season so hot, right? 4 straight top 24 weeks, 2 RB1 finishes. Looked like he was going to be a league winner in fantasy by like Week 5. A lot of people probably valuing him as like a low-end RB1, high-end RB2 in their rankings for the rest of the season at that point. But then in Week 5, he suffered an injury, started getting banged up, lower body stuff, concussions, whatever he was dealing with. He missed a game or two here and there, but he's never really had the same workload since those first 4 weeks of the season. And that's also kind of affected Washington's offense. If you recall, back in September, they were the talk of the town, an offense that we were all excited about. Now he gets that rest that he needs. No Austin Eckler in this game. Of course, early in the season, he had to deal with Austin Eckler as well. And we have a bottom 4 run defense as well. So this is an absolute smash spot for Brian Robinson Jr. I like him to go higher than 79.5 rushing plus receiving yards. Most other sports books have this set around 81.5, 82.5, and with juice going to the over as well. So the fact that you're getting this at even money, just picking the higher or lower is why Underdog the best option. Of course, if you guys want to sign up, you know what to do. Promo code FSE. Go over to the link in the pinned comment as well. You'll also get this bonus free square, and you can tail the entry that we're building out here. So RB16 for me in my rankings is Rico Dowdle versus the Carolina Panthers, 32nd against the running back position. We know they're one of the worst run defenses, if not the worst, in the NFL. Rico has been excellent the last 3 games, finishing with a top 16 performance in all 3 weeks. Now he gets the single easiest run defense in the NFL. The Cowboys are underdogs versus the Panthers, but I don't think it should surprise any of us if this is a really close game. Comes down to like a last-second field goal. The workload has been so good for Rico Dowdle. He's had 20-plus opportunities in 3 straight games. And also, too, he's been over 100-plus rushing yards in back-to-back weeks, and he's been uber efficient on his touches. So with Rico Dowdle going up against such an easy matchup, it is an absolute smash spot for him. And I feel really confident starting him as a top 15 to 16 running back like I have him ranked here. Running back 17 in my rankings. And keep in mind that this is if Bucky Irving is out for the game, not active but limited. So if Bucky Irving is out, which is kind of what I'm projecting based on what I've heard in Buccaneer Twitter land, Bucky Irving has DNP'd 2 days in a row and then limited practice Friday. I am ranking White as if Bucky Irving is going to be out for the game. I will post updates in the pinned comment if we get word that Irving is going to be active but limited, or maybe he's just going to be active in general. He is a game time decision. I expect that game time decision to be that he sits out. If Bucky is active but limited, I would probably downgrade Rachaad White to a low-end RB2 play and Bucky Irving to a, flex play kind of territory. They'd probably be like 23 and 28 in my rankings instead of 17 and unranked like they are right now. Chargers are a tough run defense, but the receiving work can definitely propel Rachaad White into a good performance. We've seen anytime he's gotten the full workload this year, he's actually been quite good. I mean, he's got 14.3 PPR points per game this season, with Bucky Irving kind of stealing the workload a number of those weeks. So he's been rather consistent, especially when you get a full workload out of him. I expect to have a good performance, especially if the Chargers are tough against the run. He'll probably catch a lot of passes in that game. So running back 18, closing out this tier for me, is Jonathan Taylor versus the Denver Broncos. They are 24th against fantasy running backs. This game's a little bit of a challenging read because on one hand, you could look at this game and just be like, oh, the Broncos are going to roll. They're at home. The Colts aren't as good of a team. But I think with the Colts, you're looking at this game basically being a playoff game for them. They have to win this game because the Broncos are the ones that are ahead of them in the playoff seeding. They're the current 7 seed, and if the Colts want to catch up, they got to win this game. So JT getting a top 5 running back workload the last number of weeks here, 87% of the snaps on the season. Like, he's an absolute workhorse. He just isn't playing super well right now. The Broncos are a run funnel defense. The Colts are entering this game with a rest following the bye, which maybe Jonathan Taylor needed. Seeing that 3 straight games before the bye, he was sub 4 yards per carry. So maybe he's kind of been dealing with something. Regardless, I like him to go higher than 76.5 rushing yards. He's been beyond this total in 6 of 10 games this season. And he also has 20-plus touch potential in this game, 18 opportunities or more in all but 2 games this season. So Jonathan Taylor, he's hard to rank higher than this because he's been kind of bad this year, but he's also hard to rank lower than this because of the workload that he's getting and the fact that I think the Colts are really going to be motivated to win this game because it's basically a playoff game for them. So moving into the next tier of running backs here, we have James Conner versus the New England Patriots. They're 22nd against the run, 20-plus opportunities in back-to-back games for James Conner, coming off of one of his most efficient days all season as well. I think this game is semi-interesting because both teams are going to be motivated to, have a good performance. Drake May and the Patriots coming off of a bye, putting on some good tape. And then James Conner and the Cardinals, basically this is a playoff game for them as well because with the Rams winning on Thursday night, with the Seahawks taking a division lead last week when they swept the Arizona Cardinals in the season series, the Cardinals basically have to win out or at least win most of their games. And the Patriots are allowing the 6th most rushing yards per game to the running back position at over 110 yards per game allowed. So I think Conner is probably going to be really efficient in this game. Only reason I have Conner a little bit lower than maybe I probably should have, because I think ECR has him up at 13 or 14, is because DeMercado is out for this game. And I think that's going to mean that we see Trey Benson a little bit more. And DeMercado and Conner worked a little bit more kind of in tandem because DeMercado is a third down back. Benson can kind of do everything. So I think we might see a little bit of a lower workload for Conner this week, but it could be, it could not matter. It's possible he just rushes for 100 yards and a touchdown in this game. So running back 20 for me this week is James Cook versus the Detroit Lions. They are 2nd against fantasy running backs. I really want to rank James Cook higher because he's had some great weeks the last couple of weeks, but he's not getting a good workload. If you look at his last 3 games, he has not exceeded a 50% snap share. He's in the single best game environment of any running back this week because the 2 best offenses in football, the Buffalo Bills and the Detroit Lions, are doing battle in a 54.5 point over-under game. But the workload is just so suspect right now. The Bills are mixing in Ty Johnson on third downs. They're mixing in Ray Davis on early downs more than they usually are in the last 3 weeks. And he only managed to score 4.9 PPR points in a game in which both the Rams and the Bills scored over 40 last week. And James Cook basically did nothing. So I have to downgrade him a little bit, as much as I think he's probably going to have a decent game because of the over-under and the fact that this game should be a shootout. I can't get myself to beyond this low-end RB2 range because of the workload that he's seeing right now. So running back 21 is Breece Hall versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. And running back 21 is a far cry from where Breece Hall is usually ranked. If you told me back in week 5 that I'd be ranking Breece Hall anywhere other than a top 3 running back against the Jacksonville Jaguars, I probably would have said you're nuts. But here we are in week 15, and Breece Hall is expected to play per head coach Jeff Ulbrich,
but he played in week 13 after rushing back from the same injury and saw minimal usage. I'm trying to take my Breece Hall goggles off because I have so many shares of this guy in best ball leagues and I've so much invested into him. I just don't think he's that great of a play this week. I think we're going to see a decent amount of Braylon Allen, going to see a decent amount of Isaiah Davis. A lot of fantasy doctors are concerned that the timeline coming back from this injury is being rushed. He's not a must start, as much as that hurts my nuts as a Breece Hall truther. I'd expect 50 to 80% of his normal workload, and that could result in Breece Hall only having like 14 touches in this game, which is why I have him ranked as a low-end RB2. He could be really efficient. He could break off a long run. Maybe you guys are of the opinion that, hey, if Breece Hall is active, I'm never sitting him. You start your studs kind of thing. But I'm a little bit more worried. I think there's enough great plays this week. Like I said, I mean, James Cook, James Conner, these guys are like just ahead of Breece Hall in my rankings as barely top 20 running backs, and you could paint the picture that they should be way higher as well. So for me, I'm just kind of playing this a little bit conservative with Breece Hall unless we get more updates that he's going to be a full go or anything like that. I doubt we're going to get any information of that nature, but if he is limited in any way, which is what I expect it to be the case, I'm going to rank him where I have him ranked, which is RB21. So speaking of limited, I have RB22, Tony Pollard versus the Bengals. They are 14th against fantasy running backs, and Pollard is also coming into this game kind of truly a game-time decision, truly questionable. He is expected to play, but Pollard DNP'd Wednesday, Thursday, limited practice Friday with an ankle injury. The Bengals are an exploitable defense, but specifically through the air. So I think Will Levis and Calvin Ridley and Nick Westbrook-Ikine are probably the guys you want to play this through in this game. Fantasy docs seem to think that Pollard may be more of like a 70 to 80% of his workload guy, especially knowing that Tajay Spears is healthy right now and can easily take away some more work. And Pollard's workload has declined in 3 straight games. If you go back to like week 7 through 12, he was getting a great workload because Spears was banged up. And now that Spears is healthy and Pollard is banged up, we're seeing a little bit more of a lesser workload for Pollard. So that's where I'm at with him. It's why I have him ranked RB22. Moving into RB23, we have Isaiah Pacheco versus the Cleveland Browns. 8th against the run are the Cleveland Browns. 8 opportunities for the first game back in week 13 for Pacheco. 18 opportunities last week for Isaiah Pacheco in his second game back. So he hasn't really been the 60+% snap share guy that we're used to seeing, but he also hasn't been inefficient either. I really expected him to not look that good, but 21 carries the last 2 games for 99 yards is solid efficiency for a guy coming off of like a broken foot. You can kind of tell he's still working back when you watch him run. He's like maybe 80% of his explosive as he was before. To be honest, he might not recapture that until the NFL playoffs after the fantasy season is over. But regardless, I think Pacheco in a game environment that the Browns probably lose big, I would imagine, to the Chiefs. Again, the Chiefs have this tendency to play every opponent close, but the Browns should lose this game against Kansas City. I feel pretty good that the Chiefs should be able to control this one, and Pacheco should get a lot of carries as a result. So closing out this tier, we have RB24 for me. That is Ramondre Stevenson versus the 19th ranked Arizona Cardinals. Ramondre's workload is like consistently RB2 level. His output and the Patriots' offensive output isn't. And that's why Stevenson himself has been rather inconsistent, because some games they get absolutely their doors blown off. Some games they look really competitive. Hopefully for Ramondre Stevenson managers, Drake May and the offense did some soul searching during the bye week, and they're going to get back to basics and post a post-bye rookie bump for the rookie quarterback. I think this stacks up quite well for Stevenson, but because of his inconsistencies, I can't really rank him any higher than RB24. So RB25 for me was Isaac Guerendo, who locked into my lineups, or locked into everyone's lineups on Thursday night. Versus the Los Angeles Rams, he had 11.4 PPR points. A lot of people were wondering, should I start him? Should I not start him? Because going into that game, of course, he was coming into it with a foot injury. But if you did start him, he gave you a median outcome, not a high week, not a low week, nothing terrible, but nothing great either. He got the touches. He just couldn't find the end zone and maybe lost a little bit of that explosiveness. But regardless, I don't think you're too upset with that outcome on Thursday night, considering what everybody else did in that game. Other than Puka Nacua and Kyron Williams, pretty much everybody else disappointed mightily there. So running back 26 for me in my rankings is Tyrone Tracy versus the Baltimore Ravens, 9th ranked against fantasy football running backs. I talked about this in Thursday's video, but I'm quite worried for Tracy in this game because the Ravens are literally 16-point favorites against Tyrone Tracy and the Giants. Despite performing well over the last month, Tracy has been game scripted out of a game. In week 12, we saw him kind of completely phased out of that game, and if he didn't score a touchdown in that one, he would have had a terrible performance. Tommy DeVito in the offense scoring like 6 points to the Ravens 30 in a complete blowout loss would shock absolutely nobody. So with me, For Tyrone Tracy, I think he's probably a guy that you're starting due to volume, but if you have a better option, I don't really want to risk the dud that he gets completely game scripted out of this one. I think that's definitely possible of happening. So if you have better options, better wide receiver options, better running back options, I don't think you have to start Tyrone Tracy in this matchup. So RB27 for me is Najee Harris versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Before Chuba Hubbard last week, who played basically every snap, the Eagles were an impenetrable force against the run and probably still are. Najee Harris is not a must start in this matchup. Super important game for both teams. I mean, the Steelers are trying to keep their division lead. The Eagles are trying to keep pace with the Detroit Lions and maybe even leapfrog them to get the bye week in the NFC. But with no George Pickens and a tough running matchup, I think the Eagles will probably win this game. And I don't love that for Najee Harris. I think he's probably going to have an inefficient day running into the back of his offensive lineman for most of the game, and it could result in a Najee Harris dud. So if you have better options, I think he's a fine sit this week, and Jalen Warren, the pass catcher, could end up being the more valuable option of the two of them. Running back 28 for me is Sincere McCormick of the Las Vegas Raiders, the new starting running back for the Las Vegas Raiders versus the 6th-ranked Atlanta Falcons defense. Antonio Pierce is kind of just like de-gaffing this whole season. Something comes up and he goes, I guess like McCormick's our starter now. But I mean, 5.5 yards per carry this year and a 62.5% success rate will do that when your backfield competition is Alexander Madison and Zamir White and Amir Abdullah and whatever absolute asparagus piss running back options that they have there. Falcons are a tough run defense, so don't get too crazy with Sincere McCormick. I know a lot of people might want to just like fire him up into their lineup and ride the wave here. It is possible he disappoints, but I do like him to get a lot of touches, a lot of carries in that game. Running back 29 for me is Nick Chubb versus the 1st-ranked Kansas City Chiefs defense. This one's pretty straightforward, pretty cut and dry. Nick Chubb's predictable. If the Browns are expected to win the game or keep the game close, you can start him. It's a terrible matchup against the number 1 seed in the AFC, so I don't really love Nick Chubb this week, and I think you absolutely can sit him. The Chiefs have a tendency of making every game close and playing down to their competition, like I said, but I still think Nick Chubb, who's been over 5 yards per carry every season of his career and is currently at 3.1 this season, it's just unfortunate. I don't think he's not back to his full self. We might never see that until next season. So if you have Nick Chubb and you're like, oh man, I was stashing him all year for him to be like a league winner, I just don't think it's going to happen. He doesn't look quite the same. The offense isn't good. The offensive line's in tatters right now, and you're probably not excited if you stashed him all year. Travis Etienne versus the New York Jets, 13th ranked run defense. Etienne and Tank have been splitting the backfield. With Mac Jones, you can't imagine they're going to be in too many game scripts like they were last week against Tennessee, where they actually won the game and they were ahead for the majority of the game. Workload-wise, I think we're looking at Etienne being slightly more valuable because he is like a 50+% route participation guy, and he has 21% targets per route run on the season. Now, I don't think the Jets are a world beater either, but I do expect them to probably take care of the Jaguars in this game. And if the Jaguars are down at any point, I think Travis Etienne could catch a lot of passes in this game, so I slightly prefer him to Tank Bigsby, but I'll talk about Tank Bigsby in a second here. Getting into my deep league flex plays, again, there is some guys dealing with injuries. Again, I did not include a single Bears running back in my top 30 because I don't know if Swift or Roschon are going to play, but I do have Travis Homer here ranked at 36 in case they are out. I don't really love him against the Vikings, but he will probably get volume. Running back 31 in my rankings is Gus Edwards versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's basically got to fall into the end zone because the Bucs are a top 10 run defense. The Chargers are favored to win this game, and maybe I'm being a homer here as a Bucs fan, but I'm not really sure why they're 3-point favorites because they can't run the ball. I mean, Gus Edwards has been pretty bad, and the run game has struggled in general. Justin Herbert is dealing with like multiple lower body injuries. And the receivers, while Ladd McConkey is great, Quentin Johnson's struggling. Josh Palmer's just a guy. I know the Bucs defense is bad, especially in the secondary without Antoine Winfield this week. But I do think this game could be a win for Tampa Bay because the Chargers matchup-wise just don't stack up super well. And if we're able to blitz the crap out of Justin Herbert and his receivers aren't getting separation, we could actually win this game. So Gus, you're hoping for 15+ carries and a touchdown because that's pretty much all he can give you. But if he's game scripted out or, worst case scenario, he's just super inefficient, only gets like 6 carries and Kamani Vidal gets more work, that's also a risk with Gus Edwards. So I don't think you have to start him by any means. But if you do have no other options, I don't think he's terrible. RB32 for me is Jalen Warren versus the Eagles. I already kind of talked about it with Najee, but I think the Eagles could control this game. Steelers on the road versus a tough run defense. Warren might be the lone bright spot of the offense without Pickens, and Najee likely running into the back of his offensive lineman most of the game. I think Warren could have a game like we saw back in week 12 against the Browns where he outscored Najee Harris. He had 15.4 PPR points. I could see something kind of similar to that, and that was also versus a very tough Browns run defense in that game. Running back 33 for me is Javonte Williams versus the Indianapolis Colts. They are 24th against the run. If I had to start a Denver running back, it would be Javonte Williams as of now. Should be a close game. Broncos are at home. This stacks up well for what Javonte Williams does. But before the bye, we saw Jaleel McLaughlin lead the team in carries. And hopefully that doesn't continue if you have Javonte Williams. But I do think he is not a must start because of how risky his workload is. RB34 for me is Tank Bigsby. Like I said, he's getting work. 10 to 15 carries makes him a low-end starter if you need one, but I do think this profiles as more of an ETN game. Running back 35 for me is Justice Hill. The New York Giants are so bad. They're 16-point favorites against them. This game has a run funnel defense and a game that could be out of hand by like the third quarter. So maybe Justice Hill gets more work if Derrick Henry does most of the damage in the first half, which I think could be the case here. I like Justice Hill to have like 10 plus touches in this game. And then as I kind of alluded to already, my RB36 as of now is Travis Homer versus the 4th ranked Minnesota Vikings. It's too early to say if Roschon's going to be out or if Swift is going to be out. We still have one more day of practice for Swift, 2 more days of concussion protocol clearing for Roschon Johnson. Check the pinned comment for updates on this backfield because I definitively can't rank any of them where I want to rank them, knowing what we know right now. If DeAndre Swift is going to be active and, let's say he's going to be like 80, 90% of himself, he probably would have been a flex play guy right behind like a Najee Harris, right ahead of like a Sincere McCormick. If Swift is out and Roschon clears the concussion protocol, I would probably have Roschon in the same relative range as well. But as of now, I have no idea if both of them are going to play, neither of them are going to play, whatever the case is. So that is the end of the RB tier list. Again, if you want to tail the pick'em entry that we ended up building out here, you guys can go ahead and do that with the Jonathan Taylor higher rushing yards, the Brian Robinson total yards, and then also the Chuba Hubbard total yards. You can head on over to the link in the pinned comment. Use the promo code FSE to sign up over on Underdog Fantasy. When you sign up, you'll get up to $1,000 in bonus cash. You'll also get this Jordan Love free square. When you sign up using that promo code FSE, you can get this free square. You can add it into the entry. If the entry ends up hitting, you'll win up to 10x your original money. If it doesn't end up hitting, obviously we'll take that one on the chin. But we feel pretty good about some of these matchups here. Hopefully you guys do as well. So hit Underdog if you guys are feeling it. You can just play higher or lower on all of your favorite players. It's the best place to play DFS games, drafts, best ball, playoff best ball is coming up as well. A lot of those drafts are live right now. So if you think you know who's going to win the Super Bowl and you want to play the best possible way to cheer for the NFL playoffs, playoff best ball is definitely for you. We're going to have a stream on Monday going over playoff best ball strategy and how we would like to draft our teams. And we're going to do a couple of drafts as well. So definitely stay tuned for that. But with that being said, leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.